For this Humanities midterm project, I chose to create a video to compare and contrast the Renaissance age artists Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. In doing so, I will describe each artist and their works, and display the importance within their world of art. But first, it is important to understand the vastly fascinating time period in which both of these artists lived, an era known as the Renaissance. The Renaissance is a cultural transformation that took place between the 14th century and the 17th century within Europe. In this time, the way of life of most Europeans had dramatically changed. It's often referred to as the period in which the rebirth of Europe, as the art, the culture, and the economics, and even the politics of the region changed so dramatically within the short period of time. As I had previously come to know it, it was as if everything in the art and culture of Europe had changed. Art had become much more complicated within this time frame. Artists now worked to show ideas within their work, like classical learning, nature, and human anatomy that hadn't been focused on before. Not only that, but art had also become an even greater way to share information throughout Europe, as it was faster and easier to interpret. Leonardo da Vinci was born in Michelangelo, Italy in 1452. He had an odd upbringing, as he was first raised by his father and stepmother, but then went to live with his grandparents around the age of 5. He had a fair amount of education, as he was able to read and write by the age of 14. Michelangelo was born in Cyprus, Michelangelo, Italy in 1475, just 23 years after the birth of Leonardo da Vinci. Michelangelo's childhood was also somewhat troubling, as his mother had gotten extremely ill, forcing him to be taken care of completely by a nanny. He had also received a fair amount of education, as his ability to read and write were clear. Leonardo da Vinci's work is clearly recognizable, as his ability to display proper human anatomy was ahead of his time. This can be seen in the vast majority of his pieces, like the world-famous Mona Lisa. Michelangelo also displays the ability to show human anatomy within his art, especially in his sculptures. This can be clearly seen in works like David of Michelangelo and Bucci's. Michelangelo's art portrayed the ideology of the church, as his art, such as the Sistine Chapel ceiling, displays objects like angels. Not only that, but is decorating a chapel. Leonardo's art often displays more of a scientific ideology. This can be clearly seen in Vitruvian Man, as displayed here. But he still has works that display the church's ideology, as that can be seen here in his painting The Last Supper. Now that we have a fair amount of background information on both artists, let's work to compare and contrast the two famous individuals. In comparison, both artists lived and thrived in the early years of the Renaissance. Both had grown up in a fair amount of education and with a somewhat complicated home life. Both displayed their ability to do amazing portrayals of human anatomy in their art and became known worldwide as some of the best artists in the world. In contrast, Leonardo da Vinci was more than just an artist, as he had become a world-renowned scientist, inventor, and philosopher. Michelangelo, on the other hand, dedicated his entire life specifically to art. Michelangelo had close connections to the church, whereas da Vinci did not have such strong connections. So, in conclusion, what I found out doing this project is, though the artists had both been so impactful for the time in which they worked, they're not too terribly different. One of which had used their art to show scientists what he was thinking about, what he had found out, and what inventions he could create. Also, some ideas of the church. That was Leonardo da Vinci. But Michelangelo, not too terribly different, used ideas of the church and even human anatomy to show his ability to display art.